Hey guys, Squatcher Loading here. Today in this video we are going to pretty much finish up our 38 special setup on this Dillon XL750. So in this video we're going to focus on setting up our seating die and our taper crimp die. So some of the things that we're going to need today is a good set of calipers because we're going to measure the case overall length, and we're going to be shooting for around 1.44 inches or so. Or just, when we're seating to the cantilever, there's a lot of opinions, seat right at the front edge or the furthest edge in the cantilever. I like to just go a little past the middle and set my crimp there. So that's what I'm going to shoot up for with this seating depth. So let's get the seating die set up and let's take it from there. Alright, so we're going to use the Dillon seating die. And these dies are kind of neat because you can remove, take them apart for cleaning and stuff like that. So I'm going to remove the seating stem out of the die body just so I can show everyone. Basically all comes apart. Here's a center pin, and then inside is an interchangeable seating stem. One side is for flat or hollow point type bullets, truncated cone, wad, well actually not for wad cutters. In your 38 special kit, you're going to get a specific stem for wad cutters that you'll need to use when using those. And on the other end of this one is a round nose. So these bullets that we're going to be using today, again 125 grain flat nose with a cantilever. These are going to take the seating stem that has the flat edge in it. So we're going to reinstall that back into our seating stem body, put it back into the die body like so, and replace our keeper pin. So let's get this in the tool head and get it set up. Alright, so we're going to take our seating die and we're going to get it started here into the tool holder, and we're going to cheat a little bit. I always keep at least one. I try not to shoot all my rounds up at once, but here's the round that I'm looking to build based off my load data. So I'm going to use it to kind of rough in my overall length. And sometimes you'll still have to make an adjustment here or there. But I ran it up into the die body in station 4. And I'm going to go ahead and snug down my seating die here. And just based off my experience, once I feel it make contact, if I back it about 1/8 of a turn, that usually gets us pretty close. So now I'm going to take, this was our setup for our case mouth expansion, got my bullet in, and we're going to seat it and see what our overall length looks like. And again, we were shooting for about 144-ish, so it's 144 with an 8 there, and you can see that we're just on the very fringe of the cantilever, so I'm going to go ahead and dial that down a little bit more. Nope, still got some movement there. Let's check our measurement. Yeah, so we're right there. 143.7. Let me get it evened up there. 134.38. I'm happy with that. So we're going to call that good. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to run this back up into the die. I'm going to snug up my lock ring here, grab my die lock wrench, and we're going to snug it down. Alright, so now that we've got that die set up, we're going to move on to the crimp, because we can see here that we've got a little bit of flare yet. So we want to get that crimp down into that cantilever. So I'm going to move around and we'll bring you right back. Okay, so I have indexed our case into station 5, so we're going to go ahead and start setting up our crimp die. It's going to go in again station 5. I'm going to get it in a couple turns, and then I'm going to bring the round up into the die, and I'm going to start threading this down. And usually I can just tell by how much resistance I get if my crimp's good or not. And as you guys reload more, you'll get a feel for these dies. and it won't be nearly as difficult. A lot of people overthink the crimp, and when it comes to crimp, you know, basically less is definitely more. So now I can feel I'm getting some good engagement. So what I'm going to do here, and I need to block the camera for a moment, excuse me, is I just need to wiggle this die and keep snugging it up until I can't turn it anymore by hand, just like so. And this is how I do all of my crimp die. So I know I've got it fully seated up in there. So now I'm going to back the rim a little bit, and I'm going to go about 1/4 of a turn, run it back up in there, and then I'm going to start visually inspecting my crimp and see where we end up. So I've got the first one out, and you can see we've already pretty much taken most of the flare out, so I'm going to go a little bit more. I like to tighten it up a little bit on the crimp groove, probably more than I should, but that's the way I like to run it. And what I'm looking for is I want to close the case mouth up in the cantilever. I don't want any gaps, so that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to tighten that up a little bit more. That felt pretty good. So there, I've got a nice crimp into the cantilever. So I'm going to call that good. I'm going to run it back up into the die, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten my lock ring. Some of these a little tricky. You got to remove that pin sometimes to get that lock ring snugged up. But there we go. Now we're going to double check this again in our case gauge, check the length again, and make sure we're good. So I've got our setup around here, and one thing I get questions on a lot is everything was good. I set up my crimp, and then all of a sudden I'm not fitting my case gauge. And this happens a lot with you guys that are using the combo seat and crimp dies, and I've talked about this a million times. I'm not a fan of those. They're so sensitive to get set up. I always seat and crimp in separate operations, but what happens is you start to either you're putting too much crimp, excessive crimp, or you're starting to crimp before your bullet's seating, and you'll buckle the case here. So a good rule of thumb, after I set up every crimp, I'll run it back through a case gauge again. Or if you got a specific gun with a real tight chamber, those are like CZs, for example. Some of the Kimbers, very tight chambers, and very sensitive to how well you set up that crimp. So again, we're all good here. Everything looks good. I'm happy with the crimp. So this one we're going to disassemble because I'm going to not waste any components in this day and age. But we're going to go ahead and get some powder in this, start making some throws. I'm not going to get into load data, guys, here. If you're reloading, work up your own recipe, check your load manuals, work up from a load manual. That's the best way. I'm not here to give out load data, but I'm going to double check my powder charge. I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up your powder measure as well, since we're at it. And then we're going to get running some of these in the bin and see how I like them. Hey, so real quick thing, and I kind of forgot, but when I set up my crimp, and you remember I said I was going to save all these components, well, one thing that I did was I went ahead and pulled the bullet after we made our crimp, and I just want to make sure that I'm not cutting into the plating. Again, these are plated bullets, and we are taper crimping into a cantilever, but you can still get overzealous with your taper crimp and damage the plating. So this is the bullet that I pulled out. As you can see, there's a slight depression into the cantilever, but there is no exposed lead. It's basically just slightly a little bit of deformation into the cantilever, but nothing extreme where it's exposing lead, and that's what we want to definitely avoid when using plated bullets, especially like high-tech coated bullets or your own powder coat. Make sure that your crimp isn't too excessive where you're exposing that lead, and that leads to all kinds of things run dirtier, you lead up your barrels and so on. But just a quick tip when setting up your crimp, pull one, double check and make sure you're not getting too overzealous with it. So let's get some powder in here, check our throws, and start cranking the handle. All right, now that we have some powder in there, I'm going to grab a 5/32 Allen wrench, and I'm going to make sure that we get our spacing up here away from this primer sensor, and make sure that our fail-safe rod is relatively parallel with the magazine tube. So we're going to go ahead and button up these lock nuts here, and don't have to get super aggressive with these, just snug them up so it keeps everything in line. So I've got a case down here in the shell plate. Let me make sure you guys can see that. I'm going to zoom down here. Yep. So we have a case in there, and I'm going to make several throws before I even check one, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give this powder measure some taps, and what I'm doing is I am unifying the powder into the powder hopper. You'd be surprised if you put a little mark up there, and as you're running, this powder settles out pretty quick, but I'm just trying to expedite that process a little bit so I'll get consistent throws. So I'm going to go ahead and make a couple drops, and all I'm doing is just making sure that that powder is actually going into the case. And when we're doing this, we want to make sure that we're making, you know, a full stroke down and a full stroke forward while pushing forward, mimicking like we are seating a primer. And I'm going to do this 5 times or so to see what my base charge is, and you can see the more you do this to the case, the more that the end wears out. But I have, or flares out. I use the same case over and over. A lot of guys think that you get some variability doing that. I haven't noticed anything more than a tenth either way by doing it this way, so that's the way I do it. So I'm going to throw it on my scale over here real quick. Make sure I get everything out. So I've got a charge on the scale, and now I'm going to double check my load manual to see what target load or target weight I'm looking for, and then we'll come right back. Okay, let's get ready to run. I'm going to give these a little bit of one shot again. Not on my pistol brass. I like doing it in a cardboard box like this, and then just give them a good shake. We'll let those rest up for a few minutes before we throw them in the case feeder, but we are ready to run some ammo. Alright, let's get these in the case feeder. It's a good time to double check and make sure everything's going to work the way it's supposed to. We can go ahead and crank that up a little bit. Alright, looks like everything's dropping out like it should. Alright, so I've ran a couple through the press, and this is a good time to double check your setup, because sometimes you'll have to make a little bit of adjustment to account for shell plate variation, the deflection actually on your overall length, and sometimes even on your crimp. But if you get it dialed in with mitigate as much deflection as you can, typically you don't see any issues. So again, we are shooting for 144, and these are measuring at 137, or I'm sorry, at 1437, which is right where we had it set up. So those still look good, even the ones coming off the back into the press. So I'm going to go ahead and just run these out, and then we're going to just reflect on a little bit. So stick around. right, so we got all of our 38 special ran. We got our press finished changing over, setting up our seating die and our crimp die, and we ran a bucket full of ammo. So those are going to be a lot of fun for steel challenge and so on, or just some leisure shooting. So that's going to wrap up this little mini 38 special series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you have any questions, hit me up on my email, squatchreloading@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as well, @squatchreloading. And if you like these videos, you like the content, heck, if you like this channel, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like and share, share it with your friends. Again, questions, hit me up. I appreciate it so much. We will see you on the next series. But until next time, guys, God bless.